Federalist 49, Part 2. I'm going to start with paragraph 2. And just don't forget, one of the main reasons that I sit in front of the camera with a book in my hand is to encourage you that when you come across these videos, to make sure that you read along while you're listening. Because if it's your first time listening to these Federalists, especially since you don't speak English for the first language, you're an immigrant, or even if you speak English for the first language, if you don't look at the text, it's very hard to, I think, understand it, because when I read it slowly, sometimes some of the rhythm might be lost. And I acknowledge that myself. I accept that myself. But I try to do my best. So try to keep the text in front of you, please. His proposition is, okay, remember he said we were going to look at what Mr. Jefferson had said about what his opinion is and how to go about setting up a separation of powers where one branch won't dominate the other two. So when he says his proposition is, it means Mr. Jefferson's, is that whenever any two of the three branches of government shall concur in opinion, each by the voice of 2/3 of their whole number, that a convention is necessary for altering the Constitution or correcting breaches of it, a convention shall be called for the purpose. Let me read this one more time. His proposition is that whenever any two of the three branches of government shall concur in opinion, each by the voice of 2/3 of their whole number, that a convention is necessary for altering the Constitution or correcting breaches of it, a convention shall be called for the purpose. So Thomas Jefferson says, okay, if we see there's a problem, we have to go back to people as fountain of power. We're going to go and just convene, have another convention when 2/3 of the houses of Congress agree for this convention to take place. Okay. Now, in the next paragraph, he says, Madison says, as the people are the only legitimate fountain of power, but here again he's quoting Jefferson, and it is from them that the constitutional charter, under which the several branches of government hold their power, is derived, it seems strictly consonant to the Republican theory to recur the same original authority, not only whenever it may be necessary to enlarge, diminish, or new model the powers of government, but also whenever any one of the departments may commit encroachments on the chartered authorities of the others. The several departments being perfectly coordinate by the terms of their common commission, neither of them, it is evident, can pretend to an exclusive or superior right of settling the boundaries between their respective powers. And how are the encroachments of the stronger to be prevented, or the wrongs of the weaker to be redressed, without an appeal to the people themselves, who, as the grantors of the commission, can alone declare its true meaning and enforce its observance. Okay, I'll keep on reading and then I'll come back to them. There is certainly great force in this reasoning, and it must be allowed to prove that a constitutional road to the decision of the people ought to be marked out and kept open. for certain great and extraordinary occasions, but there appear to be insuperable objections against the proposed recurrence to the people as a provision in all cases for keeping the several departments of power within their constitutional limits. In the first place, the provision does not reach the case of a combination of two of the departments against the third. If the legislative authority, which possesses so many means of operating on the motives of the others, or even 1/3 of its members, the remaining department could derive no advantage from this remedial provision. I do not dwell, however, on this objection, because it may be thought to lie rather against the modification of the principle than against the principle itself. Okay. So Jefferson says we'll get 2/3 of, let's say, the legislature, say we're going to convene a convention and write a better constitution and write an amendment. He says, okay, even if I agree with this, even if I accept it, you got to be thinking that those same 2/3, the legislature that might have overreached its authority has enough power, because remember, as we talked about it in Federalist 48, legislature has the power of the purse. It's what they call, because legislature is the one that divides the revenue. Okay, money is in the hands of legislature. He says that 2/3 legislature, even if they're overreaching their authority, the other two branches cannot stop them, because this 2/3, because they have the money in their hands, they will scare the other 1/3. Okay, it's easily they can intimidate the other 1/3, or not necessarily intimidate them. Maybe they could mislead them, or one way or another, make sure that the 2/3 number will never be available. Okay, because all you need is 1/3 of the legislature plus 2 people. Then you can't get the 2/3 number, right? So it's easily, Mr. Jefferson is very wise, he's very smart for proposing this, but in reality, we're not thinking in theory. In reality, this is not the right way to go about it, because you can easily corrupt 1/3 of the members of the legislature plus maybe 5 people. Then that won't give you the 2/3 you need. So he's talking to you about both sides. Not only you can go about it this route, but also remember, he's going to say it here in a little bit, that the other 2 departments, because they are away from the people, like judges don't run for election, let's say on the federal level, right? Because we said federal judges will be appointed and they'll be in their seats during good behavior. In other words, they are not an elective body. So because of that, people are not really that close, that in touch with them, like the legislature is. So people really will not respond to them as quickly as they would to the members to the legislative members that they have chosen. So he says the executive and the judges, this is before that we had TVs and radios and stuff like this. So you have to keep in mind, we were talking about 1787, that the members of legislature are more easily accessible and are closer in touch with people. Sometimes they're relatives of the people that are electing them. So he says those two other branches can easily be intimidated by this one branch we call legislature. So constantly he's reminding us that we have seen in the last 11 years, it's the legislatures of the states. And because we have the legislatures of 13 states that have overstepped their boundaries. So we're going to set up a system that the legislature of the federal government also will not overcross or encroach upon the rights of the others. He says we have an example. We are sure that the legislature of the federal government will do the same thing if we allow it to. So he's trying to make sure that this separation of powers is just not in theory, but it's in reality.